The UK Army has shrunk to just 76,000 men, half the size it was in 1990 and the smallest it has been since the Napoleonic Wars. Thank you all very much. It is a tremendous privilege to make what will be my final paper speech here in the chamber this evening on a motion which is of a particular personal significance to me. Like many people throughout this country and beyond, the armed forces have been deeply important to my family. My maternal grandparents met during their national service in Cyprus, and my paternal grandfather served in the Air Force. Today, more than ever, it is important as we are gathered here this evening that we honor the memory of those brave soldiers who 80 years ago today stepped off the landing crafts at Normandy. The plaque above the President's chair commemorates the officers of the Oxford Union who fought and who died in that war. If it was not for their sacrifice and that of all the brave men and women in this country and its allies, we would not have the opportunity to debate this motion here tonight. The significance of the 80th anniversary of the Normandy landings casts a long shadow over the current state of our armed forces. For too long, they have been subject to crippling budget cuts, a lack of investment, and the complacency of our elected politicians. It is for these reasons that I cannot, as much as I would like, stand in good conscience with the opposition this evening. However, before I begin the main substance of my speech, it falls upon me to introduce the speakers for the opposition this evening. Speaking first is Mr. Israr Khan, a DPhil student in law at Regent's Park College. Mr. Khan is a former member of Standing Committee and a former Chief of Staff here at the Union, who has shown his commitment and dedication to the society many times. Speaking second is Mr. Noah Robson, a first-year undergraduate student at Christ Church. Noah is one of the most competent and hard-working members of the Union, and I cannot wait to see what he goes on to do in the society. Finally, we have Lieutenant General Sir Graham Lamb. Sir Graham has served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it is a pleasure to welcome him here this evening. Members and guests, these are your speakers, and they are most welcome. So I want to start off by clarifying exactly what this debate is about. It is not a comment on our brave servicemen and women who are willing to dedicate their lives in the service of our country and the protection of all of us here in the chamber tonight. No, instead, it is an attack on the policy decisions of our elected politicians which have left our armed forces in the dire state they currently find themselves in. Now, the idea for this debate arose from a comment by a senior US general last January that Britain was no longer a top-level fighting force. To understand just how significant the decline in our military strength has been, I would like to lay out some key important points which were raised in response to these comments. The UK Army has shrunk to just 76,000 men, half the size it was in 1990 and the smallest it has been since the Napoleonic Wars. Now, the opposition tonight may argue that modern wars are not fought purely on numbers. They are fought on equipment and technology instead. Well, guess what? I have some figures on that as well. The armed forces would, and I quote, run out of ammunition in a few days if called upon to fight. We lack the ability to defend our skies against the level of missile and drone attacks currently facing Ukraine. And we've had a 5% decrease in the number of armored fighting vehicles. And of those that remain, the majority were built 30 to 60 years ago. This decline in equipment and resources screams of complacency. Now, today we mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, but it feels very much as if our world still teeters on the edge of catastrophe and of danger. I ask the House, when will we learn our lesson? How many times will it take for us to realize that our armed forces are not some expensive luxury white elephant, but the first line of our defense as a nation? Look to the people of Ukraine, on the continent of Europe, now living amidst bombs and rubble. It happens when we least expect it. Let us at least be prepared. Now, the opposition may also argue that the UK is able to exercise soft power or that we remain a fighting force through our membership of NATO and our close military relationships with other countries, in particular the United States. However, this fundamentally misunderstands the motion at hand. It is not whether Britain and her allies are a fighting force. It is whether Britain herself has the capacity to defend her own shores and her interests abroad. Frankly, this is not the case, and we have allowed ourselves to become far too dependent on our allies, banking on the promise that they will come to our aid. It seems that we do not even share the collective will to be a fighting force once again. In a world with increasing threats in the Middle East, aggression from Russia and China, is that really a chance we can afford to take? So how did we get to this point, where our soldiers are forced to operate with essentially one hand tied behind their back? It has been decades of mismanagement from the top down. Defense spending has halved since 1988, and we barely make the 2% target set out by NATO. Now, accepted?
Is it not the case that the decline in Britain's fighting force dates back much, much longer? I think maybe perhaps back to 1776.
Trust the American to always bring that up. Never mention 1812, though. But, as I said, defense spending has halved since 1988, and we barely make the 2% investment target set out by NATO. Current government has promised to increase military spending to 2.5% by 2030. But this is frankly too little and too late. They've also planned to introduce national service should they win the current elections. But again, this doesn't tackle the problem and would be far too analogous to a phrase I have used in this chamber before: sending lions led by donkeys to the slaughter, like the mere cannon fodder we witnessed in the First World War. However, I have not lost hope, and neither should you all here in the chamber tonight. And I'd like to tell you a short story as to why. Now, I'm making my final paper speech in this chamber tonight, but I want to bring those of you who are here your minds back to spring of 2023, when I made my first paper speech in this chamber on the motion that this House would not fight for king and country. During that debate, a floor speech was made by a certain Mr. Mark Omrod. Now, Mr. Omrod was a soldier who served in Afghanistan when in 2011, on Christmas Eve, he stepped on an explosive device. He lost both of his legs and one of his arms in the attack, and he became the first triple amputee to survive the conflict. Yet he stood in this very same chamber at these very dispatch boxes, and he stated he would do it all again without hesitation. What heroism, what courage, and what a true sense of service. Members of the House, that is the spirit of our brave servicemen and women. And it is reassuring to know that they share the same passion and dedication to our country that those soldiers who landed on the Normandy beaches and whose sacrifices we commemorate tonight did 80 years ago today. I have faith that although Britain may no longer be a fighting force on the world stage, if we honor the spirit of those who fought in the Second World War, should the worst come to pass and we do find our country facing renewed dangers, or at worst, under attack, we can all be confident that Britain will not go down without a fight. But seriously, the time has come for us to stop sentimentalizing our soldiers whilst walking away whistling with our hands in our pockets when the moment for equipping and supporting them arrives. For us to be that fighting force once again, it requires each and every one of us to carry on that heroic yet humble spirit which has animated brave soldiers and generations in times gone by, whose efforts we commemorate today and in whose spirit we should all seek to continue in times to come. Thank you.